Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the studio. My name is Ben Lyttleton, and I'm delighted to be joined by two giants of the game. Next to me is Wim Jonk, a former Netherlands international, who played under Johan Cruyff for Ajax and won the Dutch League, the Dutch Cup, and the UEFA Cup. Jordi Cruyff, who I'm sure most of you will be familiar with, has played for Holland, Barcelona, Manchester United, and 5 years ago, he was appointed sports director of Maccabi Tel Aviv in Israel. At that time, they hadn't won the league title for 9 years. But with Jordi there, they won 3 league titles in a row, and they qualified for the UEFA Champions League group stage, and since then have qualified for 2 Europa League group stages. I have a quote from an Israeli journalist who said, "You could compare Jordi's influence at Maccabi to the influence of his father, Johan, at Barcelona." And now Jordi has taken over as coach at Maccabi Tel Aviv, which is an interesting development. So before we start, let's watch a short video that I think sets the scene quite well. So we saw Cruyff as a player, as a coach, and through his academies as a philosophy of talent development. Jordi, what's it like for you to watch those images now?
For me, it's always difficult because it's emotional. You see your father, he's not here anymore, you miss him. Many people will see him as a man of football with a clear philosophy, as a player, rebel, as a coach, always thinking about how beautiful the football can be played and combine it with results. But for me, when I see him, of course, I see my father, just like any son will see his father, and brings back a lot of memories, especially one of the goals there was as an Ajax player. He returned. A lot of people doubted if he still had it, if he was not too old. And he came in his first game and gave that chip with the Ajax shirt, and wow, you know, from there on it was again Johan Cruyff the Big. I'm just very proud of everything that my father stands for, both on the field, but especially off the field.
And Wim, your relationship with Johan Cruyff?
Yeah, he was a sort of a mentor for me, especially the last 5 years when I was at Ajax. I could always call him and phone him up for advice. But it started in, I think it was late in the 80s when I played for a small club. And he wants me to sign for Ajax. And he phoned me up and said, okay, I saw you play, you played well, so next year I want to sign for Ajax. So I signed for Ajax, but Johan left. So unfortunately I never played under him as a coach. And that is still a bit of a fight for me, because later on we get in touch again, and I learned so much from him, because he gave me so many tools and he feed me with a lot of things, especially the last 5 years. It was amazing.
So you reconnected with him when you were head of the academy at Ajax?
Yeah, that was the cause of, because he said, okay, now you have to become the head of the academy and reform it again, because first of all we get together, and he said to me, and together with Ruben Jonk, and we wrote the plan Cruyff for Ajax to revive Ajax again. Yep. Because he was not satisfied with how Ajax acting at that moment. So we wrote the plan, and that caused a lot of revolution in the club, because things were going to change, and then what does that mean? So then I become head of the academy, and so I have to reform that, and that was my biggest task.
Yeah. So we know that the Cruyff philosophy was so central to the success of Ajax in the 70s and Barcelona in Spain in the last decade. Jordi, can you explain briefly what the Cruyff philosophy is?
Well, I think I can best explain a few key words or a few key sentences which were important for him. First of all, he loved attacking football. But to attack, you need to be a good player. You need to dominate a lot of things necessary in football to be able to achieve that. You cannot attack when you don't have a good organization. You cannot attack if you don't dominate the ball control with left and the right foot. You cannot attack if you don't know how to run into space, or if you then never arrive on time when you're too late or when you're too early. You have to know the right timing of your runs. So I think he tried to find all these things with one final thought, which was always to try to attack, because that's what the fans want to see. They want to see movement, they want to see passing, they want to see dribbles, they want to see goals, they want to see everything that has to do with a winning mentality. And I think he spent a lot of years trying to convince people that you can get results with attacking football. And I think the success of Ajax with a lot of youth players that we saw last May to reach a Europa League final with a lot of previous work done by a lot of coaches, by Ajax Academy basically. I also think if you look at Barcelona or even Guardiola, who are always linked to his philosophy, I mean that keeps it alive, and it also shows that you can win with attractive football.
Yeah. And Wim, you are now keeping that alive through the legacy of Cruyff football.
Yeah, that's what we try to do, because he gave us so many tools, and he wants to share it with the world. I think that's the most important thing. He wants to share his things. What he did for football, he inspired so many coaches, so many players. So he wants to bring that back into football again, and to help the football again, to bring it to the next level again.
So can you explain a little bit about what Cruyff football is and does?
Yeah, first of all, if you talk about Johan, about football, he always start with not about playing systems or things like that, the 4-3-3 or the 5, it doesn't matter. For him, is the most important thing is the principles of play. Jordi already mentioned a few. That was his opinion. Okay, what are we talking about? We're talking about the third man. We're talking about the 3-second rule. We're talking about spaces. How can we create spaces? So that was more important than tactics. Okay, tactics is also important, because it changes all the time, depending on situations. But first of all, it was always the principles of play, and of course, first of all, you need the skills to do all those things, and that makes attacking football.
Yeah, but this is one of the problems, is that not every squad has a Messi, an Iniesta, a Xavi to be able to execute the skills to that level. So how can you translate those principles to players of a lesser standard?
That's what we first did, because, okay, everybody's talking about what is attacking football. What is it? That was my first question to Johan. Tell me, I need tools to improve the academy. So if I have a boy from 8 till 19 years old, how can we train him? How can we bring the principles in his DNA?
Yeah.
So that it's more easier for him when he goes to the first team, that it's already there. It's all the stuff that you need is in there. So that was the first thing we discussed a lot. And then we came to the principles, and we can show them now on the screen as well. I think they are there.
Yeah.
If they can push the button, yeah. These are the most, but when Johan phoned me up, he always, and that's why I make them a bit darker, the third man he always start with. Because that was the most important thing for him. You need a third man.
Explain what that is.
It seems simple, eh? For him everything was simple, but to explain it, it's okay, you have one man on the ball, you have a second man, he was looking for the spaces. You pass him and then somebody must underneath. And if you are there, so we're going to show here, look at these pictures. That's what he always, it opens up the tempo in the game, the rhythm of play. For example here, it's not always the best team will win. The most spectacular teams, it's not just about winning. It's also how do you play. For this example, this Brazilian from '82. I can still remember the midfield with Junior, with Socrates, with Zico as a striker, with Eder. But they didn't win. Yeah. They lost against Italy. But I still remember how they played. And they played with the third man, and they played and to create 1v1. These pictures as well. It's the Bayern from Pep Guardiola.
And this is almost happens throughout Johan's career. I mean, he played in the Dutch side in '74 that famously didn't win the World Cup final, but is one of the best remembered and most loved sides of all time.
Yeah, but he always thinks in okay, where can we benefit? Where can we find the 1v1? Get those players on the ball, bring those players in action, because that are the best players on the pitch. But it depends on not just moving the ball, but also moving the opponent. So and so you can tire them up.
And you can train this in academies to players that don't necessarily have the visual clarity of a Xavi.
If you start early, you have to start early as possible to bring those simple things in the academy. But first of all, it all starts with the technical skills. So you have to improve what Jordi already said, the left and the right foot. All the simple skills must be perfect. And now these days, some of the players, the simple things are not good.
Yeah, so it starts at the base. And
yeah.
Jordi, for you, what was it like to grow up around these principles? Do you just take them in through osmosis because you're surrounded by them, or was there some reaction against some of them? Do you believe in all of them? Do you adhere to this philosophy now as a coach?
Well, I try. Very difficult.
Yeah.
It's not easy. But I've always grown up with the same words, the key words. He always wanted to dominate, to control, to be in command, to dictate your philosophy over your opponent. He always was a very daring person as a coach, as a player. He was always thinking one step ahead. So he always thought, the team is very important, but the team can get better if you improve individual skills of the players. Again, that they dominate both feet, that they can play with the back towards the opponent goal, how to move their body to have a different angle when you control the ball, that you can see, if you want to go there and you only have 2 touches, you already must to have a control this direction. A lot of small details which I think are almost automatic, because from the age of 8 years old until I think 19, it's a development that you go in the youth, and without knowing, you just practice, and eventually it's in your DNA. He always said that the ball is quicker than the player, so control the ball. That's the most important thing. That's the best way to reach places. And of course, you need to train on first touch, your passing skills. very important exercises. For example, what Wim said about the third man. I mean, two guys are easy to mark. You know, if we have a 1-2, it's easy. But the third one running behind is the one that people don't see. And the ball has to finish there. So there's a lot of principles, even the fresh football that we've seen under Guardiola when he was in Barcelona, or Ajax even last season under Peter Bosz. You know, they had like the 3-second rule, which means when you lose the ball, you want to recover the ball as quick as possible. So the immediate pressure to recover the ball before 3 seconds, so the team doesn't have to drop back 50 meters, but you stay forward.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm trying to implement a lot of these things, but it takes time, obviously. It's not so simple.
Yeah. I mean, the images of the Brazil 82 side, for me, are very similar to the Dutch 74 side. Yeah. Winning is not everything, and that's almost key in talent development above all, that you don't want to focus on winning, you want to focus on the development of the skills.
Yeah, especially in the youth academy. It's less important to winning. And that's difficult to say because every coach wants to win. But I always said winning must be in your DNA. If you want to be a top player, winning is always there.
Yeah.
So we don't have to discuss it anymore because it must be there. Otherwise you don't reach the top.
And one of the things, Jordi, that you did as sporting director at Maccabi Tel Aviv is hire these fantastic young, smart coaches. Paulo Sousa, Oscar Garcia, Peter Bosz, who went to Ajax and is now at Borussia Dortmund. But you never hired Wim Jonk, and I always wondered, why not? Tell us why not.
Because I think my father would not, he wouldn't be happy with this. You don't steal in the family. You
don't
cannot
take
take
it from the family.
No, I was, no, I knew my father was, I think, you know, Guardiola, of course, he's very visible. But my father always had a very special connection with Wim on the same, you know, the small details of football, the really small details that people don't see and cannot think about. And I actually thought about it many times to approach Wim, but my father would not have been so happy with that. So I resisted that thought and it just went elsewhere. But about what you just said, winning and losing. In the youth, of course, it's about developing. It's not about winning. You don't develop a player when he wins every weekend his games, because normally you learn more from defeats than from the wins. So, of course, when you reach a first team, then it's about winning also to create belief in that this way of playing and this vision is the right one. With my father, I always had one thing that we never really agreed on, and I asked him the question many times to see if he would change his answer once, but he never changed. I always said to him, you know, 1974, people remember you, remember Holland for the way they played, but in the end you didn't have that gold medal. Would you have changed it? And he always said no. He said the biggest victory is that people talk about us. The color of a medal is not something that will change my philosophy, but our philosophy, the way the football was played in 1974, that opened up a new cycle in football. And he preferred not winning and having that, you know, having that respect or being able to come with fresh football ideas. I think he was much more happy and proud of it, and he never changed his mind about that.
And you would have taken the gold?
I'm not sure. When I argued with him, of course, to get a reaction, you always have to disagree first. So I tried to disagree on that. But the truth is, so many years after, people still talk about the 1974, and they talk about you know, the Barcelona of the last years with, you know, the 4-3-3, the attacking from the sides, always play to win, home and away from home. You know, in the end, that is the biggest victory. And there's, of course, there's many coaches who afterwards have implemented the idea and made it more modern with modern tools. But he always was a romantic football man, and he achieved to make romance and winning titles together.
This is an example of the 3-second rule, Wim.
Yeah, because Johan always said, okay, everybody looking at me at a very offensive coach, but I think very differently. I always want to be in control of the game. Okay, you need to be in control, you need the ball.
Yeah, especially high up the pitch.
High up the pitch, but if you don't have the ball, you have to win it back as quick as possible. So you have to put pressure on your opponents all the time. Then you have to run those kind of meters what they run today.
Yeah.
14, 15 kilometers. Are they crazy? Are they crazy?
Yeah.
Why you have to run that much? but it's a different sort of watching the game. That's what I learned from him. And there are many visions. Yeah, it's not that's it, because there are many ways to improve. There are many ways to win games. But this is a way, and I believe in this way because you also see the joy of playing. What I saw in the Ajax Academy as well, the joy if they are free, they can use their creativity, and especially if we promote it.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most important things. Promote creativity in the academies, because there are so many coaches who always said stop. Because don't stop. Let them learn from their mistakes. That's the best way to learn.
Yeah.
So that's what Johan always mentioned as well. Make mistakes.
So is that the best way to develop creativity? Because that's what the goal is, attractive football, and you need to be creative for that. So is the best way almost a non-interference rule of just go and make mistakes?
Yeah, okay. At the moment, after six times, you can say something. Otherwise, you're stupid. But he thinks, okay, yourself knows where you are doing well or not.
Yeah.
So find it out. And after 2-3 times, maybe Jordi will say to me, Wim, pass it to me. Pass it quicker. That's what he wants. Get influence from each other, not just from the coach. So help each other out and bring those things in the players.
Yeah.
And that brings top players.
And have you ever had aspirations to be a head coach yourself? Because poor Jordi's had to appoint himself as coach because he can't ask you.
He wants to bring the money for himself. But no, there's still something in myself. Okay, but at the moment, this is my. I gave my commitment to this job and to this thing to do. And first, I want to do this well. And maybe there will be another day that I can maybe together or to do something else as a head coach or something different.
And Jordi, can you explain why you have made the change, the leap from being the technical director of a really successful side and doing very well there, with this really smart knack of finding good coaches, to appointing yourself or just choosing to become a stressful coach? I watched the Europa League qualifying game, and if you had hair before that game, it probably would have been fallen out.
I didn't have that problem anymore.
Exactly. I mean, it's stressful.
Yeah. No, I think it's. Of course, I've spent a lot of endless hours talking football with my father. He loved talking about football. So every game we would see was, analyzing everything. I think I've also learned a lot from coaches in the last 5 years, because as a sport director, I was always very close, not on the field, but always in the sport complex, watching every training, every game, talking a lot about tactics with the coaches. And I also learned a lot from the recent coaches. And I think after 5 years, kind of a technical director, sport director, I just felt for myself I needed also something new. And I also think the club was, maybe sometimes it's good to get new messages, a bit fresh ideas. And with the owner, we discussed about it, and we were both happy to make this change. Of course, it's a different job, much more stressful, as you said. But that's part of the game. It's good to take responsibilities not only up but also down. So I only think that it will help me a lot in my course to learn, especially from mistakes. And I'm directly more responsible for good and bad things. So I think it's a nice challenge, nice thing to try, and we'll see how it goes.
And you are now in this position where results are more important than, or as important as attractive football. So how do you get that balance of getting the results but also still playing the football that you want to play?
Well, I think first of all it's to get good results and also to play good football. To be in a position to get good football, you need a very good organization, with and without the ball. Try to give very short, clear messages. not showing 45 minutes of videos. Players after 10-15 minutes, they seem to disconnect. So we try to do a lot of possession games, a lot of quick, short analysis, very clear messages from what we want, and practice. It's a lot of trainings, and of course you need to improve, and step by step, like as a baby you learn to crawl, then you learn to stand up, then you try to walk a bit, with time you jog, and in the end you end up sprinting. Football is the same. It's a process. It starts at the youth academy, and it ends up in the first team.
Can we see the project at this club as a case study for the Cruyffian principles that Wim was talking about earlier?
No, I think the clubs that are very clear ambassadors of this philosophy is, of course, Ajax and Barcelona. And Maccabi is my own, probably I'm the one having a test case, like I'm the test case. But, it's a challenge. Football, if you don't try things, you'll never know how good or how bad you are. So it was the right moment to give it a try.
And in terms of where Cruyff football goes from here, Wim, the philosophy is established at Ajax and Barcelona, but you're taking it to new markets as well. Can you tell us where you're going with Cruyff football?
First of all, to your own roots. So we had the discussion with the federation in Holland, because Holland is not doing very well at the moment. So
Can you come to England as well?
No, England is doing well. If you look at the under-20s, the under-19s, there is a lot of talent that's coming up. So there will be some good times for England as well. I hope so. So there is enough talent here, and but in Holland, I think we can improve also the courses as there, because the results today are a result from earlier on. So then you need to go back 7 to 10 years. So we are a bit lazy, I think, and other countries are passing by. So we have to do something and to improve ourselves again. That's also the Dutch way. We always did it like that. So I think we can get out of this problem. But okay, we gave them a hand as Cruyff Football. I want to help. So if I can help, I will do that for football.
And can we see the success of Ajax last season? Jordi, you mentioned it, reaching the Europa League final. Can we see that as a proof point that this can work? Because those players that played in the final, over half of them were developed in the academy based on the principles of the Cruyff plan.
Yeah, for sure, because that's the process we went through. So then you go back to 5 to 7 years, and what have you done in those 5-7 years? So the result was very clear. Everybody was enjoying the football, and okay, they also lost games, but at the end, if you go on in that process, you get results at the end. So you have to believe in it and stick with it. If you don't stick with the plan, then everything goes wrong. That's why we left Ajax as well, because we had a disconnection with the board of directors. And Johan and myself, we opposed it, but then they start to play political games. Then we said, okay, then we have to leave. That's a shame for Ajax, but we gave them a hand, and we lost our hand.
Yeah. But you're also talking to other federations as well, further afield from here. So tell us about the new markets that will soon be playing Cruyff football.
Yeah, it's at the moment, if you look at Belgium, they are doing so well because they started that process 10 years ago. So now, if you see what's happening there, it's not just a coincidence. It's a good generation. You hear people say sometimes, yeah, it's just a good generation. No, it's hard work to get those players up. And they have lots more to come. So what are we talking about? That's the thing. And so we had also in Belgium a connection with the Flemish Federation. We did coursing there as well. And 220 people came up because they were inspired by Cruyff's vision as well. So they picked up the good things from Dutch football 10 years or 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And now look where they are.
But then neighbours, I mean, you have gone to China and spoken to the federation there where they know Cruyff and they love him. I mean, it's easier to convince people that this philosophy works if They remember him from the 70s or are fans of him, right?
Yeah, also in China, because everybody's going to China because money market, and wrong people go there as well. So where do you start? So we try to think in a different way, and we have a connection now with the school system. So everything goes wrong with the school. So that's what we now doing with the Montessori philosophy, and that's very close to the philosophy we have. So we made the connection, and there we go and start to develop. And we already did a course over there from 10 days. They start from scratch. So.
But that's easier for you almost, isn't it? Because they have no bad habits.
No,
and it's a clean template for you to work from.
Yeah, that's very nice, because they are very inspiring, and they want to hear your stories, and they want to learn.
Yeah, and for these new national teams or new markets, are they using Cruyff football as a plan A for the future, so that generation of players that are now 7, 8, in 10, 15 years will be playing this style of football? Is that their plan?
That's what we try to explain them. You have to work on a process. It's a process. So it takes a long time to bring those players up and develop them in the right way, and to give them the freedom they need, to enjoy, believe in what you are doing. And if you do that in a long term, you will get results. And that's what we try to explain, and hope we can help. It's how do you look at things? And if you believe in things, everything can happen.
Jordi, do you think this has to be the primary way of playing? Can you use the Cruyff principles as a plan B? If you're chasing a game 1-0 down, can you switch to it, or do you need to be fully immersed in it from the start?
I think you have to be from the start. It's not only a system, or after 70 minutes you need something different and suddenly you want to go attacking. It's something that from young age you have to have inside, and you have to develop that. And like everything, it's easier to defend than to attack. To build a house can take a long time. To rip it down apart is very simple. So to be creative has always been much more difficult in almost everything in life, especially in football. So that creativity is something you need to work on from a very young age, and implement the key words, keep possession. If you have the ball, the opponent doesn't have the ball. If you control the game, they will run more than you. You will tire them out. If you play fast, they need to switch sides, running behind you. There's a moment they don't reach anymore, and that's when you sort of find that key moment to attack, to hurt your opponent. I mean, there's a lot of things that come to it, and as Wim also said, it starts from a very young age. I think the Ajax youth have been used or are using this vocabulary keywords for a long time. Barcelona also the same way. That's why it's not a coincidence that the best time of the Barcelona were when they had a lot of youth players in the first team. Now it's a little bit more difficult. They haven't had the second team. Barcelona B was in the 3rd division instead of being in the 2nd division, so the gap was too big from the 2nd team to the 1st team. But normally you can very clearly see which players have been in the Barcelona youth system since the age of 7, or the ones that arrived at the age of 15. Even that you can recognize very quick. And I believe that clubs must have a DNA, must have be known for a way of playing football, and not just change because you change a coach, you change a whole different system. Barcelona cannot play counter-attack football. They cannot play different systems. The fans don't accept it anymore. There's one way of playing, which is dominant, and we want to win, and we always play to win. And for that, you need to work very hard when you're young.
So if you are chasing a game win, what is the plan B if you're playing this system? Sorry, principles, not system.
Yeah, but it's a funny story, because Johan told me in Dutch we call it God zegen de greep. Nobody understands me now, but
I know what you mean.
It's a bit like God Save the Queen, all or nothing. There can be moments in the game that you need something different. You tried everything, but first of all you have to train it. If you use it, you must have trained it. So that's what he said to me as well. Bring it now already in the academy. Try to And it sounds a bit strange, but he used it when he was 3-0 up with Barcelona. Because otherwise the people go early home, 3-0, the game is done. Everybody is, I go to my wife and drink a beer. And then he brings in another center forward, somebody behind, win the second ball, get out to the sides, bring the balls in. Because then he trained it. He can train it in a game. That's when especially when he needed, he already trained it.
Yeah. That's really smart. Do we see other coaches doing that today?
I don't think so. Maybe Pep does it.
Yeah.
Pep does it, I think, because he's one of Johan's favorite. And Frank Rijkaard, I spoke with Frank Rijkaard as well. He used it a lot. Also, Marco van Basten, when he was a coach at the Dutch team, I know he used it. But there are so many things you can learn and you can change sometimes. Because also when you play against 10 men, what are you doing? Yesterday evening you watched the Hungary game against Portugal, and they were with 11 against 10. Well, what happens? They slow down. They slow down the piece of the game. Now, Johan always wants, okay, now you have to pace up the game. Do it for 20, 30 minutes and see what's happening. They get tired, you will find a way, you will find a goal. And then you can relax a bit. But first you have to find the first or 2 goals if you play against 10 men. Otherwise, the 10 men, they give 120%. And if you go down to 95%, you're in trouble. So that's another thing you can learn. And those little details I brought in the system at Ajax to let players think in another way. Because when you need it, you must have trained it, and then they know what's going on, and they can switch over.
So above all, it seems to me that as well as being a great player, a great coach, developer of a philosophy, above all, Johan was a teacher, an educator. Would you say that is his biggest legacy, that he wants to teach?
He was an innovator.
Yep.
He brought in, especially at Ajax as well, he brought in also another mentality from other sports. Because we at Ajax as well, we had athletic coaches, we had from the judo, we had coaches from the American football, because they bring in another mentality, because they know how to fight, they know I got one chance, and that's a different mentality than football players have. So that was also Johan, okay, bring other things in the system. And in the football world, sometimes it's difficult, but what's happening? But yeah, he was like that.
And do you like coaches who like to take risks?
I think it's necessary. If nobody takes risk, then the game finishes with a 0-0. So somebody needs to go for it. For example, what you said before, when one team gets a red card and it's 10 against 11, everybody expects 11 players to win easy. But how many times don't you see that actually the team with 10, they seem to be playing better than before? For sure it has to do with something in the mindset that you say, wow, we're one player less, so we need to give a little bit more, work harder for each other. For sure that has something to do with it. But my father always said, if you're 11 against 10, play man against man, and you have one extra man on the field. So put pressure, play 1 against 1. And you always have one man at the back, like an extra, like if something goes wrong, he's still there. So he, basically when he saw a red card during the game and he was watching television, that's when his eyes would open up the most. Like, let's see how they're going to solve it. And of course, he will end up many times disappointed that the team of 10 actually played better, and he just couldn't understand how they didn't see it. And he gave me a lot of small logical things, like throw-ins. When your team has a throw-in in the opponent half, it's always the right back and the left back making the throw-in. And he always asked the question, like, why are they throwing the ball? Why don't you give the ball that the winger throws the ball? Normally, he gets always the ball back. The one who throws the ball almost always gets it back. So he was always saying, on the opponent half, the wingers have to throw in the ball because they're the best players 1 against 1. So if they throw the ball and 80% of the balls are always given back to the man who throws, then you have a dribbler on the ball, which is basically what you want to achieve. So he had so many of these small details of logical thinking, but we don't seem to apply it.
I hope there are no rival Israeli clubs represented here who are now going to mark
no
the wingers in the second half. Let's open it up to the floor and see if there are any questions from people here. I think there might be a roving mic at the back, so just put your hands up if you've got anything you'd like to ask Jordi or Wim about Cruyff, Cruyff football, or indeed life itself. Anyone?
So thank you, that was it.
There's one at the back there.
One of Johan's great disciples is Pep Guardiola. What do you think he would make of what's going on at Manchester City at the moment? So spending huge amounts of money and not really using the academy players.
Well, I think as Wim said before, academy is a long story. You know, it's not just I'm coaching a player 16 years old and in 2 years he'll be a top player. I mean, youth is from age of 7, 8 years old until the age of 18, 19, and then you're ready or not. So people sometimes mistake. It's like when you bring a new academy director, you cannot ask results in 1 or 2 years. Normally the results are visible after 3 to 5 years. But I also think, of course, City have a little bit of also pressure to get immediate results. So I don't think the fans will be very happy to wait 10 years to get a result. So sometimes you have that kind of pressure also. But I think if I see the last games of Man City, especially, I think it was the home game when they played with 10 against 11. I think it was Everton. Come on, it was was a beautiful game to see. Still trying to dominate an opponent with 11 players, and I think even coming from one behind. I mean, they're obviously making steps forward, but don't underestimate that. Of course, when you play against Barcelona, you know, if Messi has a good day, then there's not many systems that can stop him. That's also part of football. But I do think with Man City, if you analyze the last years, I certainly from the outside think that there's a growing pattern.
Any other questions? Yes, right at the front here, please.
Thank you. Jordi, quick question. How are you getting on with your club in Ibiza, and what's the longer term plans there?
Well, my mind is a bit more in Maccabi, so my 100% now is my coaching job. As you can understand, 2 bad weeks as a coach and a lot of things can happen. So now it's a different kind of mindset. So my full focus is on the training pitch, exercises. The same like we were talking with Cruyff football. You know, of course, there's a whole plan set up with a lot of exercises. You cannot implement the same training exercises to an 18-year-old or 16-year-old and a 10-year-old. You know, the sizes of the pitch are different. The intensity of the exercises are different. The number of players you use in exercise also have to differ. You know, that is a nice part, even though I'm not touching it at the moment because I'm more with senior players like the first team. But I do think the process of developing players in youth, that is the beauty of football. And of course, a chef never gives his exact recipe. That's why, you know, we give a bit of a broad and basic introduction. But actually, it's very interesting to understand how to develop. The other part, you know, the Visa, it's a football club. Obviously, we had the best intentions. We did get promoted, but to be honest, my focus is full and complete on being the coach now.
Any more? We've probably got time for one more question. Yeah.
Thank you. For both of you, because of the increasing speed of the game, I think that the gap between academies, between kids that are 19, 18, 19 years of age and the first team has increased. What would be your thoughts in narrowing that gap and keep developing talent between the age of 18 and 20?
If you look at what happened last year with Ajax, for example, they were the youngest ever in the European final. Okay, it's the Europa League, they say, but if you continue with that and that process goes on, now there is another coach again, so things will change a little bit, but I believe if you go on with the process and where they started last year with, and there were a lot of young players in, 17, 18 years old. Yeah, it's unbelievable, but it still can. But you have to believe in it, and you make choices, because are you going to buy a player or are you going to bring in a young player? So that's always the line where you have to discuss. Is that the thing? What happens in the games as well?
One more question? Was there one more? No? Well, I think now's a good time to wrap it up. Thank you very much indeed, Jordi and Wim. And when China win the World Cup in 2042, we can all say it was down to Cruyff football. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks.